and welcome to the pitch for the Dragon's Tavern. I'm the team lead Cassidy Noble. The pitch date will be May 8th, 2022, and we will release this the last day of July of 2022. So a little bit about me. I joined HomeTeam back in May of 2020. I've been a game changer for 6 times. I've led led a project in all 3 groups, being Outpost, where I did a JRPG called Strikeout, Apollo. I led the Mysteries of Clark's Magic Academy, which was also a JRPG, and then in Lighthouse, I did an arcade cow collection game called UFO Moo. And then on the side, I've also created like a dozen games on my own, including a spin off of Wordle called Wordplay, where it's a 6-letter word instead of 5, and you can do it as many times as you want, and Record Scratch, which is like a music rhythm game. So a little bit about the Dragon's Tavern. You're in a fantasy tavern similar to like Dungeons and Dragons. And after a long day of adventuring, you are in the corner of a tavern when the owner comes up and pulls out 2 decks of cards. He hands you 1 deck and challenges you to a game. And looking through the deck, you can see that it's filled with monster and spell cards that are used to attack your opponent. And you're trying to get your opponent's health down to 0. So the inspirations, this is taken from a little bit of YuGiOh, a little bit of Hearthstone, and a little bit of a mobile game called Card Crawl. And in YuGiOh, you have monsters and spells and traps, which is this GIF off to the right, where you can use them to attack your opponent, and they have different effects that you can use. And then for Hearthstone, I'm going for like an aesthetic type of thing, and like the variety of attacks where like you can attack all of the opponents at one time. And then for Card Crawl, where you're going after one opponent and that opponent doesn't change, but the deck could change a little bit as you go along. And also in the combat strategy, where if you're taking like a 5 attack monster against like a 3 attack monster, your new attack after that attack would be completed would turn into 2. So the gameplay, the cards that the player has are both spells and monsters, and they can be interchangeable with the deck. You can buy better cards, you can win better cards, and there is a cost associated to each of those cards. So the best example would probably be Hearthstone here, where each card has a cost up here in the top left. They have like an attack value, and then they have like a defense value. And then the goal would be similar to Yu-Gi-Oh, where like your health or your life points are trying to turn your opponents into 0. You don't want yours to go to 0 because then you would lose. For the artwork, I'm trying to do a blend of 2D and 3D. So I guess Parappa the Rappa might be a good example, or like Paper Mario might be another example, where the opponents and the cards and the card table are all in 2D, whereas the desk and like the floors and the walls and the doors are all 3D. And for the artwork of the individual cards, I'd like a variety of styles. So similar to Yu-Gi-Oh, where like you could have chibi on one card, you could have like a super realistic metal dinosaur on another card, you could have like a cartoonish thing or like a background art type of aesthetic. But I think the variety would bring a lot of artistic creativity to the game. So let's take a look at what we have so far in the game. It's a very simple scene so far. It's just one room, and you're just playing at this one card where you have a couple of different canvases for those 2D effects. And if we look at the gameplay itself, each of these red dots indicate the health that you and your opponent have. So like yours would be off to the left here, and your opponent's would be off to the right here. I don't have anything working on the functionality on the table right now. This is all a learning curve to me, so I'm trying to figure it out as well. But you can see we have like the different monsters here, where you have the name of the monster, the art of the monster, the cost, the defense, the attack, the type, and the description of what the card does. And then for spells, it has the art and the name and the description of what it does. And so you can hover over them and it will pull it out of your hand. You can left click to place it onto the table, or you can left click to pull it out of your hand to prepare to place it onto the table. You can do that for any card. And then also for your deck, you can click on your deck here and you can draw a new card. And this hand will resize based on how many cards you have in your hand. So the idea will be that you'll play monsters on the field. You'll be able to rotate them into attack or defense, and you'll be able to target your opponent's monsters on their side of the field. When they're destroyed, they'll go into this graveyard pile, and if you have a higher attack and you're attacking an attack monster, then their health will go down. If you have a higher attack and you're attacking a defense monster, the monsters are destroyed, but their health won't go down. So it's a balance between attack and defense that you have to establish before the turn is over. You can also see in the background here some of those 2D effects that we're going for along with the 3D effects. So if we could have like some background people sitting at a table or like some artistic creativity on the floor, the walls, or the door back here to create a very unique experience. If we jump back over to the presentation here, we also have the Trello board that's up and running. We have a couple of GIFs here for the inspiration. We're using Unity 21.1.4 F1, and we have some descriptions over here. We have a card list in the description for some ideas to create some of the cards, and we'll look at that here. We have both monsters and spells. We have the names of those cards. We have the card set that they'll be created in, so that sort of helps with a little bit of organization. We have the cost associated with playing those cards. Spell cards won't have and cost associated with them, but monsters will, and those monsters all have an attack and defense. They have a type that's associated with them, where like certain spells may benefit or hurt those monsters. So like ancestral lore will increase one lore type monster by 2, and we have a couple of these lore monsters here. We have a description of those monsters, and then some other notes. I'm going to borrow some artwork from a previous game that I did, and all these are using scriptable objects while you're inside of Unity. So all you would have to do is just right click here, create cards and a monster card, and you would just fill in this information and it is now in the game. So I'm trying to make that as frictionless as possible. So we have a monster set and we have a spell set, and all of these will be dynamically changeable in the player's deck. Let's see. We're trying to keep everything within the left mouse button and the right mouse button. All of this will be against one AI, so there's no local multiplayer, no online multiplayer. The idea would be that their deck changes after each round, and you can go back and you can change your deck to make it stronger or more synergetic the more cards that you earn. And here's a general list of the card template. We have some warm-up tasks here, and by the end of the project, it will be 12 weeks, and that could be essentially broken down into 3 segments, one of them being the core functionality of the game, which should be the first month or so, or the first 4 weeks. I'm going to be out the week of 6-5. I have a chess tournament that I'm going to be leaving for, so then we'll finish up that core functionality the week after that. So that will be the player ability to lay a card on the field in attack or defense position, the player able to attack the monster, the animations of moving cards to the graveyard or playing cards onto the table, creating a couple sets of the cards so we have a little bit to work with. We are dealing with AI in the terms of an opponent, where like the opponent can draw a card, they'll need to be able to read their hand and read the table to see what the player has done so they can make educated moves. So that will be a nice new challenge. We're going to do a little bit of second pass on the art for the card so they don't look like square boxes, because my 2D art is not great. We're going to add a little bit of music as well as those animations that we're talking about. And then if we look into the second section of the game, we're going to try to have more cards built in. This will be the content creation part of the game. So we're going to add more sound effects. We're going to clean up animations and clean up some artwork. We're going to have like a hub store, so that way the player can, once they win a battle, then they'll get some money. They can go to that hub world and buy new cards, and they can adjust their deck and then go back in and play again. Also have a little bit more for the sound effects side of things. And then the last third of the project will be looking at bug fixes, play testing, reviewing from those play tests, cleaning up the warm-up tasks, adding the credits, and releasing the game. So that's the general flow. It'll be split into 3 distinct sections over the 12 weeks. So ways to get involved. It'll be very heavy on 2D art. So we'll be looking into like unique card art. So right now I have taken a couple post-it notes and I sketched out these drawings, which is not the greatest, but that's something. And then I took a picture with my phone and scanned it in. We could also do like digital art through Photoshop. We could do pixel art that we attach to the card. So there's lots of flexibility there. But each card will need to be different. So like Sky Dragon or like Pancake Bunny, those can all have different styles if we would like to do that. We also have opportunities for UI elements, and there's a lot of 2D play here. And that'll be like for the player health or like the card effects or like playing things on the table or like the combating images, so that way it's more user feedback towards the player or just general information display. And then we also have those background characters. I don't really want to keep these like unhappy looking squares. So it'd be kind of nice to have like a kobold sitting at a table or like an orc sitting in the background. That'd be kind of fun. We also have some texturing if we want to add that to like the floor of the bar, to the table that the player is playing at, the walls or the doors. And speaking of those, we have a little bit of 3D modeling. So the player that the table is at is about the only main 3D object that we will be examining in the 3D space, except for the walls and the ceiling. So we can make that try to feel like a camera, and we can probably do some pretty high-end assets if we want to, since the camera won't be moving. And we could also do some neat things with baking the lighting. Another key element to the game would be the game design portion. So this is kind of unique, where we have unique card names and unique card functionality, so we need to make sure that those can be in there, and we can keep track of that through that Google Doc that's linked into the Trello board. Another key element that I'm not so I don't have a ton of experience with is card balancing. So that will help make the game fair and determining the right balance of attack and defense to prevent power creep and to prevent like certain cards from being straight up broken, or like the player can like cheat the game or the enemy can cheat the game. And then the theming, this is very open. I think the more open, the better in this example. So like we could have like a vampire chef, or like the canon of the heavens, or like an elite pop star, or a couple of them that I've referenced on previous pages. So I think the more creative it could be would lead to more creative decks that the player could make. We also have AI programming, where, like I've said a little bit earlier, the opponent will need to read their hand, read what the player has done, be able to create plays on the table, and then be able to execute those plays on the table to make sure that it flows smoothly and that it makes sense. And then in terms of music, we have some background music. We can do it like a D&D style tavern, or we can do like more battle music themed towards the while the player's playing. And we also have some opportunity for sound effects. So there's lots of opportunities here where like the player can play a monster card, play a spell card, they can attack and have like swords clashing, or you can have like a dissolving effect if it goes into the graveyard. We have like a player win and a player lose. So lots of opportunities there. So that is the Dragon's Tavern. We already have the Trello channel up, or the Slack channel up. There we go. So feel free to join the Dragon's Tavern. And again, the release date is July 31st, 2022.